much I've been in British Columbia pretty much since 1994, and I worked for a couple different firms in British Columbia, in Vancouver, until 2001, and I started space2place in 2001. So I just wanted to talk to you. We're kind of in a time of a lot of uncertainty, and I get the sense that the profession is starting to change quite a bit. Much more I'd say the change in the last 5 years is much more dramatic than in the previous 20 years of my professional experience. And I just wanted to share with you some of my observations that I see, how it's affecting our work, and some of the trends that I think we might be looking for, that we might be headed towards in the future that will impact the profession and the work that we're doing. I just wanted to start out just acknowledging that I have the privilege to live and work on the unceded territories of the Coast Salish peoples, including the territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, Stolo, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations. These are the nations that share the territory in the Vancouver area. It's a little bit different context than in Ontario. There's a much there's a much more diversity of nations in British Columbia, and a lot of that's related to the geography here. And also, there's only a few nations that have actually signed treaties with the government. So it is a little bit of a different environment than what we see in Ontario. Looking at the past year, just living in Vancouver here, we've had like a tremendous amount of events that have happened that are really unique in my lifetime that I've seen. And, starting with kind of early last year, we had, we're coming up with these weather event names that I've never even heard of before. So we had what's called a heat dome. So we had record temperatures, wildfires last summer, starting in the early summer. We also had the discovery of the Kamloops Residential School, of the 215 grave sites that were found there, and that had a profound effect on the Vancouver region. We also had a tornado in the fall, which was unusual. I'd never seen a tornado here before. This is a photo of the tornado out at the Vancouver airport. Then, of course, in the fall, I'm sure you heard about a lot of the flooding events that happened here. Basically, Vancouver was cut off from the rest of the country by ground for a number of weeks, and really starting to kind of bring to life a lot of these climate change impacts that we've been hearing about over time. And then to kind of cap it all off, in December, we had record low temperatures that we hadn't, the previous low was 50 years ago. So in the same year, we had record high and record low. And so really unusual for Vancouver, which is more of a kind of moderate climate. And you can actually see in the background here, this shipping container that was from an earlier storm event when all the flooding was happening. This one container got unmoored, and it anchored itself onto the beach there, and it's stayed there for a number of months. So just to kind of give you a brief history of space2place, I've kind of identified kind of like 3 phases of our company. Like, started in 2001, and some of the early projects we had were some private residential projects. Part of that is when you're kind of starting your own firm, those are some of the easier projects to get. Another thing we started to do at that time was skateboard parks, which were kind of, as a new firm, it was kind of an advantage in some ways to do those kind of projects because we didn't have a lot of competition. The other firms weren't that interested in it. They're also, relatively technical and complex. And so they were able to a way to demonstrate the kind of work that we could do, and then we were able to leverage that into other types of projects. One of the first projects that kind of we were able to really start to get some recognition for was the Garden City Play environment, which was completed in 2008. And I think one of the things that was unique about that project and how we got it was based on our skate park experience. We had done a lot of community workshops with youth. And so we were proposing, and up till then, like so much playgrounds were catalog equipment and kind of cookie cutter designs, and consulting the parents, and they would basically just say, give us as much stuff as we can get. But instead we took the approach of consulting children, and were able to get a more holistic approach to it, and also with support from the client. We did a major park in Kinsman Park in Saskatoon, so doing some work across Western Canada, larger scale parks, and we're also starting to do park master plans, and using that playground experience that we had to kind of like leverage that, so that gives us a bit of a distinctive advantage over some other firms where we can do the park master plan, but then we also have this kind of unique approach to play. From that, we started to do some more even larger scale park master plans, more ecologically focused. And then from that, we started to get into more kind of infrastructure work, projects related to wastewater treatment plants, energy centers, also looking at starting to have projects that have climate change adaptation. And this is a lot of the work that we're working on now. We still do some of the work in our previous phases, but I would say the main focus of our work are these larger kind of complex projects that a lot of them are dealing with climate change adaptation. So I've identified kind of 5 major points, and what I'm going to go through is kind of address each one of these topics, and then illustrate show you a project that I think does a reasonable job of kind of illustrating how we're dealing with some of these issues, and help to give you an idea of how, where the profession might be going a little bit. So the first topic is embracing change, managing complexity. We have all of this uncertainty. I went through kind of like all of these kind of weather events we had in the past year. Of course, we have things like COVID that are changing things dramatically as well, just changing the way people are working. And then, just in the past week, we have this major war that's started out in Ukraine. And so I think like the one thing that we can count on in the future is that there is going to be a lot of change. And I think that change is starting to happen more rapidly. And I think it's happening in a number of different factors. One is obviously related to the climate that we're seeing. I think the technology that we're using is really starting to change quite a bit, and providing some exciting opportunities to better understand the places that we're working and some good tools. But at the same time, there's a lot to learn, and you have to kind of always be kind of upgrading your skills along the way. So the project I'm going to use to help to demonstrate some of this complexity is this project that we're just kind of wrapping up the initial design phase for. This is Iona Island Wastewater Treatment Plant and Regional Park in Vancouver. It's a very large project. It's rebuilding essentially Vancouver's wastewater treatment plant, and it's on an island right between kind of like Vancouver Airport and the city of Vancouver, right in the mouth of the Fraser Estuary. So this is a map just trying to kind of illustrate some of the complexity that is involved with this project. Kind of around the ring here is a timeline of different projects that will be phased in over the life of this project. I think one thing working on these infrastructure projects is you look on very long time horizons. So like this is really like almost like a 100-year project, with a lot of the work that's being proposed to be phased in over kind of 15 to 20 years. So all of these different projects are components of this wastewater treatment plant that are all integrated together. And then also looking at a lot of the regulatory bodies, different people that we have to consult, First Nations, municipalities, and how some of these things are starting to be interrelated. And so you can kind of, the purpose of this diagram is really to kind of illustrate the complexity that's involved here. Through the project, there's a number of different components to that. And, traditionally, a lot of these things would be done in silos and kind of be done separate from themselves. We were unique on this project. Well, this project was somewhat unique for an infrastructure project, is that we were hired at the same time as the engineers were hired on the project. And so we were actually brought in at a very early stage and worked collaboratively through a number of integrated workshops and a lot of communication throughout this process to develop an integrated design. And so what this is illustrating is that at the beginning, there's kind of like a lot of this kind of complexity. And then as we're going through and further, things get more integrated and, until we have that kind of integrated whole at the end. So just to show you where we are, Vancouver's up here, Victoria and Seattle here. This is the area that's known as the Salish Sea in this region. It's kind of the area in between Vancouver Island and what's called the mainland. And the outfall for the wastewater treatment plant discharges into the Salish Sea. You can see here, this is the Fraser River and the sediment that's being discharged in our sites right up in here. It's right at the mouth of the Fraser River, and the watershed is quite large. It's almost the size of Great Britain, and most of California could also fit in this as well. Just it's quite a large area. One of Canada's most significant rivers. As well, looking at one thing we're looking at as well is the language maps of the First Nations in British Columbia, and there's a whole mosaic, and it's all related to the geography. And so our site sits right in the middle of the Hankamalum language. So there's 3 dialects for the Hankamalum language. So we're kind of right at the downriver. There's the upriver Hankamalum and then the island Hankamalum. And the reason why that this language kind of stretches through this section here is just based on trading and the relationships, and it's all kind of tied in with the geography. One of the things for our site was traditionally there is a lot of shellfish harvesting that happened at our site, and there was a lot of trade in shellfish across the Salish Sea with the nations on the east side of Vancouver Island. It's also an important spot for critical habitats. It's one of the major stopovers on the Pacific Flyway. And so there's a lot of bird biodiversity at our site. And as well, you can look at the salmon migration, where a lot of the juvenile salmon will spend a couple months in the estuary as they mature and as they prepare to go out into the open ocean for their feeding until they return back to the inland in British Columbia. It's also an important cycle for the replenishment of nutrients into the interior of British Columbia. The salmon will kind of bring nutrients from the ocean as they return back up, and as they spawn in the interior rivers, they die there. The bears will then take them up, bring them inland, and then they rot and provide fertilizer to the interior forests. So looking at the evolution of Iona Island over the years, this is like from before kind of any modifications happened. In the early 1900s, there is the North Arm Jetty, which allowed for the navigation of the North Arm. Then you can see a lot of the dredging here along the side. So we're really starting to change the geomorphology of the site. And then in the 1960s, there was a lot of dredging in here to build the treatment plant here, and also to build a causeway to connect the what's called Sea Island here with the Iona Island site. You can see there's a jetty that was constructed with the treatment plant here, and this extends about 7 kilometers out into the Salish Sea. There's about 4 kilometers of what's called Sturgeon Bank, which is relatively flat, and then it drops off, and so the outfall drops into deep water outfall down that kind of cliff edge. So one of the consequences of a lot of these marine structures is that it really cut off the estuary from the juvenile salmon and their ability to kind of grow in that estuary habitat. What is happening here, there's no connection here, which was a traditional connection, a mixing of saltwater and freshwater. And what happens is they get channeled out into deep water before that they're prepared to do that. And so one of the things we're looking at is how do we re-establish some of these natural systems that existed previously. You can also see that it had a profound effect on the mixing of the fresh water. So one of the things for juvenile salmon as well is like it's transitioning from a freshwater environment to a saltwater environment. And so they get these kind of extreme shocks from like freshwater to saltwater, when before it'd be more of a brackish environment that kind of helps in that transition. Also in the Vancouver region, we have climate change. These are some projections from Metro Vancouver. So looking like Januaries are going to start to feel like current Marches, Septembers will be hotter than current August. Sea level rise of 1 meter to 1.6 meters or more by 2100. Less rain in the summers. The summers here are generally quite dry, but more rain in the fall and winters. And so essentially it's going to make kind of events more extreme than what they currently are. Also anticipating less snowpack in the Metro Vancouver watersheds, which will have an impact on our drinking water, but also a lot of the vegetation here, and also an increase in invasive species and pests. So this is looking at the island itself, and so this is with a projection of 1 meter sea level rise, and you can see quite a lot of the island is actually quite vulnerable as a current condition, and as well as a lot of the kind of like surrounding areas as well. And so this is a big issue in the Vancouver area, and I think landscape architects have a role to play in this adaptation of our landscapes to help to adapt to the sea level rise. Also looking at, trying to establish, one of the important things in working in these kind of complex projects is having kind of clear goals and principles. And so this is really looking at this like nested scales where we have kind of like enhanced terrestrial and freshwater habitats at the island scale, restore estuary health at the more regional scale, and then at the Salish sea level, improve water quality, which will be primarily through the treatment plant itself. And then also looking at connecting people to nature, foster resilience to sea level rise, and integrate Musqueam cultural values and interests. And the Musqueam are right across the river from the current site. So yeah, so this is the Musqueam First Nation right across the river from the existing site. This is the existing plant right here. There's a regional park at this end of the site, sludge lagoons in here, a biosolids pile, intertidal marsh, and then this is the causeway. Then we can see how that evolves and changes in our proposed design, where the new plant is being built on the site of where the biosolids were. And we were quite involved early on, helping to frame the project, helping the whole team understand the context that they're working in, and also identifying like ecological constraints that help to identify where the plant is sited on the island. And so we had quite a bit of back and forth with the engineers on that. As well, the sludge lagoons here now are converted into new freshwater wetlands and intertidal fish habitat here on the north side. We have breaches proposed both in the causeway and the north arm, and a couple breaches on the north arm jetty to allow for that better connection and kind of fresh and saltwater mixing between the river and the ocean. And this is all going to be done over a longer time scale. You can see from like 2025 to 2035. And so on a large project like this, it's important to parcel it up into smaller pieces. And so we've identified 20 ecological projects to happen over the course of the project. And all of these have been budgeted for and are happening in relation with the plant. And I think one of the things that's important on these major infrastructure projects is a lot of projects get kind of held up in environmental issues and regulatory issues. One thing to Metro's benefit is they kind of invested in this work early on in the process. And part of the thing is like a lot of these ecological projects are enabling the larger project to happen as well. So everything is interrelated and is an important part for the overall project. And it's really about restoring health to the Salish Sea. And so while the water quality treatment is an important aspect to that, a lot of these improvements in and around the island are also contributing to that as well in a meaningful way. And then these are, I'm not going to go into these in detail, but just a little bit more explanation of the ecological projects that are happening across the island. And then also looking at managing for flood protection. The plant site itself will be raised to about 7 meters. Right now it's about 3.5 meters, so quite a lot of fills being brought in. And then also looking at ways of how some of the landscape and intertidal improvements can help to manage storm surge and also kind of adapt to sea level rise as those waters are rising. And then just a few images of kind of what the proposed, this is an existing image of this is the regional park in the foreground, the sludge lagoons, and then the treatment plant in the background, and this is that causeway. And this is what is being proposed for the design with kind of reconfiguring these freshwater lagoons. There's also going to be high quality treated effluent discharged into this lagoon, and they will kind of flow through the different freshwater lagoons, further polishing that water before it is discharged back into the channel here. These are the kind of intertidal channels here in the breach in the north arm, and this is the breach in the causeway here. This is those sludge lagoons, and then you can see how dramatically that area is being going to be restored for the future. And then you can see the relationship with the musqueam across the river. One of the things in speaking with the musqueam is really important to maintain their traditional views across this site to the mountains of Vancouver Island across the way. And so we work closely with the engineers to really keep this space open and not have treatment facilities on this side of the island. And then just a look at that breach there with the causeway. The causeway would be raised as well, the treatment plant here. Just looking at some of the intertidal habitats that will be regenerated and restored as part of this, and also an opportunity to look at ongoing monitoring and also learn from these projects so that they can inform other projects in the region. And then this is at the entry of the island. So this is the operations and maintenance building, and this will be a public kind of facing facility. And really trying to kind of capture that character of Iona Island and really kind of presenting a public face that's really suited to this site. The next point I'd like to talk about is decolonizing design. This is another trend that is really emerging, and I think it's fairly new to me, but it's something that we're starting to engage with on a number of our projects, and I think an important that is included and considered in projects moving forward. So some of the aspects that I think we need to consider with this is include more voices in the design process, including Indigenous peoples that, you know, we're living on their land, and, you know, they have a lot to contribute, and also to make these places feel more inclusive, also representing other cultures. You know, better represent the communities that we live in. You know, I think it's important that we do have that diversity and mix of perspectives included in the design, and also different cultures. You know, learn from Indigenous ways of knowing. The Indigenous peoples have been here thousands of years, and they understand these places much better than we could ever hope to. And really looking at how do we start to, you know, how does this start to inform the projects that we're working on? I think it's also important that we do include Indigenous consultants as part of our design teams. And then also consider the impact of our decisions on the next 7 generations. And so really starting to look at different timescales, not just in the next like 5 or 10 years, but, you know, what are things like in, you know, 50, 100, 200 years from now? And, you know, how do these decisions really start to, you know, I think it really starts to change things when you really start to kind of broaden those timescales. So this is a project that we're just starting on now. This is in False Creek in Vancouver. So Science World is right here. The Olympic Village is here. And we're working on this site right here. That was a part of the Expo 86 site, and really establishing this new park here. And so one of the things is we worked with Sky Spirit Studio, which is Indigenous design consultants, and they're part of our team. They developed this King Seal graphic here, which is part of a traditional story that is very related to this site, and also helping to understand this place, you know, going past the colonial history and trying to get a deeper understanding of this place, you know, before it was so modified by you know, in the last 100 years, trying to understand some of the Indigenous place names were here and some of the activities that were happening here as well. This is Sierra Tassie Baker from Sky Spirit Studio, who's been working closely with us on this project. And as well, this is from Iona Island project as well, where this is Morgan Guerin of the Musqueam Nation, explaining to the design team, you know, the traditional history of the area and trying to get a better understanding, both of the impacts that Metro Vancouver has had on the Musqueam Nation in the past due to the treatment plant, and trying to kind of open the eyes to people of some of the injustices, I guess, that have been done in the past, but then also trying to reveal what are some of the opportunities that we can have in the future. And we also had a workshop on site in the Musqueam Pavilion. And then as well, I'm kind of an advisor to this group. This is a Black and Indigenous Design Collective. This is actually a photo of Divine Demaye, who works with us. And it's a group of Black and Indigenous designers in the Vancouver region. And what they're trying to do is help to develop some programs to help to bring more youth into the design professions. And so we get those more voices into our professions. The next element here is go slow to go fast. And so that's one thing that we're finding is like, a lot of these complex projects, you can't just start into the design. You really need to take time to understand where you're working and what these spaces are. So this is actually another wastewater treatment plant. This is on the North Shore that we worked on, and it had, these are like 4 goals that we had early on that needed to be integrated into this this project. And this is a diagram just showing the typical arc of how we work through through a project with kind of early stages. We call it the discover phase, where we're listening. We have a lot of community interaction at these phases. We have our site analysis at this phase, and really trying to understand the places where we're working. Through there, we'll develop our vision and principles that will help to guide the rest of the design, develop long list of concepts, identify candidate concepts, and this is kind of like the more abstract phase of the project, where kind of like down in here, it's kind of more concrete, fact-based. And then as we get further on in the process, that's when we start to get more into that concrete kind of real realm again, where we get into a preferred design. And, the good thing about this is you get everybody on board and you spend that time early on. So the whole team gets aligned, and all of your stakeholders, community, consultants. And then once everyone understands that this is what we're doing, it makes it much easier to go ahead and then go faster in the implementation phase of a project. So this is just some kind of a few examples of some of the early analysis that we did. This is a wastewater treatment plant site, and just trying to understand where this was. This was in the delta of the Capilano River on the North Shore of Vancouver. This is Stanley Park right here. This is a photo from the 1940s, and so wastewater treatment plant site here, and so you can see this is much different now, but this mudflat habitats that previously existed there, and this is the railway that's running through here. So this is what that area looks like now with this more industrial waterfront, but trying to understand what that used to be in the past. And there's also a residential community not too far away, so how that fits in the community was quite important. Through this, we had multiple workshops with both community, also lots of workshops with like the engineering team, the Metro Vancouver staff, our team, which is called the Architecture and Community Integration Team. And through that, we developed these 9 candidate concepts, which is a very high level, as a way to kind of test different ideas and how they fit into the site. From there, we arrived at 3 candidate concepts. So this one had more of a natural focus to it. This one had more of a community focus. And then this one was really about kind of like maximizing resources that were in, and how do we look at everything as a resource, and what does that look like as a concept? Through that, we went through what's called a structured decision-making exercises, where we had all of these different objectives, and we gave each criteria a different score to help to evaluate which one scored better than the other. And then from there, we arrived at a preferred concept. And so this was the preferred concept that we had, and looking at some of the architectural strategy of how that kind of transforms what might be more of a traditional treatment plant to something that is a little bit more knitted in with the community. This is the organization of the equipment across the site. This is a much different, it's almost like a factory. So it's a much different expression of a treatment plant than what you would see traditionally, I would say. And having the public end of the plant down here. So this was connected. There's kind of like a commercial core here. And so this really made sense to kind of identify this end as a public space. And if we weren't involved with this project, they would have likely had the more kind of like dirty end of the plant, probably down here, just given its access to roads and everything. But our team kind of really helped to kind of shape the organization of this and how this relates to the community. So just a few kind of photos of how that ended up. This is that public space at the end. The next one is bioregional design. So, you know, in the past there's like, you know, a lot of globalism and that. And I think really what we're starting to see now is more a focus on bioregional design, where we have this focus on the what I call bioregions. And this is the Cascadia bioregion. So looking from Northern California, Oregon, Washington, and British Columbia, and touching up into Alaska. But, you know, there's these real kind of strong characteristics that these bioregions have. And with all of these complexities and ecological components, like it's really important to understand the places that you're working. So an example of bioregional design that we're working on is this Surrey Bend Regional Park, which was completed a few years ago. It's quite a significant regional park within Metro Vancouver, and it's within a large bog. And like early on, like the site that we were working on was disturbed and it was prepared for industrial use, and it never was developed. And so it kind of sat fallow for about 20 years, and nothing, like everything was so compacted, nothing ever really grew. And so we developed this park scheme for the site that is kind of this entry into this larger environment. And so one of the things was there is like, when they cleared the site, it created this kind of dense row of trees around it. And so we kind of poked these holes through to kind of connect to the larger landscape around it. And there's also fish channels in here that was done as part of a simple project, but we were involved with the trails throughout the bogs there. And so this is just kind of showing some of the programming that happens that's kind of happening across the site, with kind of the North Meadow, the River Trail, the main meadow here, River Lookout, natural play area, wetland, field, and parking. This is kind of the arrival experience. And then this is the bog here. This is what the site was like kind of very early on. Like it was, there's quite a dramatic change. And so this is, after it was completed, this is one of the picnic shelters there through one of those kind of view lookouts, and you can see the mountain and the kind of that long landscape beyond. And one of the things we really tried to establish with the site was really kind of embracing the natural seasons and the change with this. And so really trying to design a site that really has a different character and is really kind of integrated with the ecology of this area. So you can see the meadow here. This is late summer, spring. These are some of the stormwater channels throughout the site and how that transforms throughout the seasons. So summer to fall to winter. And this is that wetland area, and it has quite a dramatic, and the vegetation is growing quite fast. And so the last one I just want to quickly touch on is joining the dots. And so what I mean by that is, especially in a lot of these climate change adaptation projects, you have a lot of specialists that are very focused on their field, but they don't really know that much about what their work, how it relates to other fields and other connections. And so one thing I think that we're finding that our role on these projects can be is that we know a little bit about a lot of these different things, and we know enough that we can kind of connect the dots between these different specialists and help to create a more integrated project. So this is a project in South Vancouver along the Fraser River. And it's part of a new community that's going in there. And so this is a large riverfront park that has a flood protection integrated within it. So this is just a kind of concept diagram showing how that works. Have a habitat island here with this tidal channel through here. Initially, we were looking at bringing stormwater from kind of above here into here. That proved to be too difficult to get it past the railway here, but this is becoming tidal channels to provide habitat and bring that river experience into the park. And as well have a lot of kind of interesting kind of experiences along the shoreline, but then also integrating flood protection through the park design as well. So you can see here, this is a dike that moves through here. So this is kind of integrating that flood infrastructure into the park design and kind of almost creating this new type of public space that integrates public space elements, infrastructure. And so we're working with many different departments like engineering, working with environmental regulatory authorities, community members through there. And so we have all of these different kind of pieces. And, you know, as landscape architects, you know, we find that we're like, it's almost like an undefined new territory that we're working in. But I find the skills that we have as landscape architects are quite suited to working within these new territories. So this is an example of the proposed design, kind of at the central part of this park. And this is where the flood protection is integrated through the park. So you can't even really tell where the flood protection is, but it's all been designed in careful kind of consideration with the engineers of how that's kind of integrated into the park design. So this is looking at that tidal channel with the playground on the other side. Some images illustrating the park design. So this is the dike that moves through here, and then it kind of goes up and around and then continues through here. And then this is just some photos of that dike construction. So the park is under construction, it's not fully complete, but a lot of the flood infrastructure is in. And so this is all piles that's required to make the dikes seismically stable so that we were in an earthquake zone. So that's an important component for the ground improvements. The dike construction here that we'll build the park on top of. And then as well having different types of non-traditional flood infrastructure where we're going through those park elements where we have these sheet pile walls here, which will provide that flood infrastructure as it's going through that play area. So you can see how it's kind of the shape of it will respond to our park design. And then just a few images just showing how the flooding works. So this would be up to a proposed 2,100 1 meter sea level rise. And so you can see how the park is designed to flood over time and still protect some of the neighboring residential development there. So that's all I have. And so I'm happy to take any questions that people might have.
Okay, great.